Good morning. Welcome. Welcome as we gather in this circle with one another, and we come from so many different places and from so many different experiences and from so much that has shaped us even in this week since we've been together with one another. Welcome to this space as we take our place to be just who we are, just where we're at. Whether we are so sure of everything or not so sure about anything. Whether we're feeling really hopeful or we're feeling very discouraged. Whether we're feeling angry or serene and accepting. Whether we're feeling peaceful or anxious. We come in the freedom of this circle to be who we are, to be where we are, to be free to question and free to express ourselves. And we also come in deep gratitude, not only for this circle that gathers us and this spiritual community where we make our home, but also for this land and its long witness. This territory we know as Treaty 6, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering place and traveling route for Cree and Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux peoples. A land that has welcomed so many of us from all over the world, a place for generations where many of us have come to call home. We come into this circle, we come on this land with our deep respect and our great intention as treaty partners to move forward with one another, speaking truth and finding ways that reconcile. And so we sing our commitment. Among our certainties, we trust that above us are the stars, and beneath us is the ground, and within us is the light of life. We come here with each other to nurture all that gives radiance to our lives. We come seeking wisdom in story and song, in words, in silence, wisdom within us, between us, among us, beyond us. And we gather in the presence of light and in our quest for more light. Imagine life's possibilities. Imagine celebrating diversity.
Imagine justice and respect.
Imagine the questions to be lived.
Imagine the journey we share to all that is sacred.
Whether we call it prayer or not, somehow I think we all pray. For some of us, it's just a deep sigh. For others of us, it's wow. For some of us, it's I wonder. For some of us, it's oh. For some of us, it's how do we carry that? With or without words, we give expression to our deepest hopes and fears and longings, which is to say, we pray. We come with one another today to share something of the intentions we find in common with one another. And so I invite us in the spirit of prayer to offer these words of intention with one another. Into this circle we gather to consider how we are living. We come to learn the old deep ways of knowing, insight for our time, and wisdom to guide our path. May we challenge one another to be all that we can be, to forgive and be forgiven, to live graciously and generously, to commit our energies and intentions to life's best questions. We open to this time together as spiritual community that we might be inspired, live wisely and well. May it be so. I want to invite us to gather some of us here on the carpet for a time that we can share with one another. If you're big or small, if you're little or tall, it doesn't really matter. Come and we're going to make a circle with each other here on the carpet. Hi, everybody. Chris isn't here today, so I get a chance to have a conversation with you. Chris will be back next Sunday. I've been thinking about all the things that we know for sure. There's some things that we feel pretty sure about, like, what's this? A chair, and what does it do? We sit on it, and we're pretty sure that if we sit on it, it's gonna do what it's supposed to do, and it's gonna hold us up, because we've sat on a lot of chairs, so we're pretty sure about that. I brought some other things that I think we know. I brought this. What is it? Where does it come from? A feather. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Where do feathers come from? Birds, yeah. We don't know exactly what bird this came from or who dropped it, but it did come from a bird. And we know what these are. Yeah, it looks like a rock. Yeah, you're right. It's a seashell. I don't even know what kind of shell it is. Does anybody know? Does anybody know? Is it a clam shell? Oyster shell? Okay. Okay. Here's another one. I think we know what it is.
It's a snail shell.
Yeah, you're right. It's a snail shell. It's very hard to say, but that's what it is. And what about this? What's this? It looks like a rock. Feel it. There's another one. And there's another one. What do you think it is?
It looks like a planet.
It kind of looks like a planet, yeah. That's what we're looking at up there on the screen. I keep a lot of these things that we've been looking at, I keep in my office on a shelf. Like the shells and some sweet grass. And I keep these on my shelf. And they were a gift from Arv, and he can tell us what they are, because they're kind of mysterious. What are they, Arv?
These are desert roses. Let me tell you about the origins. They, you know that you go to the beach, there's sand particles, tiny, tiny particles that you can pick up in a handful and drop them down. They come from little pieces broken off bigger rocks in the mountains. They come by water, rivers typically, down to the beach. And as the water slows down, the sand grains settle. When you get home, if you take some balls and put them side by side, you can see that there are holes and gaps between the sand grains. Those sand grains are filled with water normally. But in a hot environment, the water evaporates off. The water has got minerals in it. Minerals are things that we don't eat normally. But as the water evaporates off, the minerals are left behind. And they act like glue for the sand particles. And over millennia, over very long periods of time, and actually even now, the water evaporates off and these get buried by other sand particles. And the salt water percolates through the sand inland. Where these particular ones came from was a depression below sea level in Saudi Arabia actually, and the water, very, very salty water percolates through the sand to a low spot that's below sea level. And as the water evaporates off, they get glued in place by the other sand particles, the sand. So eventually that'll get covered over. And you can go to those places where there have been below sea level for some time and dig down just a few feet. And you'll find these sitting in the loose sand still. And you can dig them out and put them up and let them dry out in the sunshine. And they've got these glorious shapes. Why they have this shape like a rose, I'm not exactly sure. It's something to do with the geometry of the sand particles that are there. But they're a delight to see. When my wife and I, when Bertie and I were out digging these ones up, we saw off in the distance a man herding camels. And I kind of thought, gee, look at that guy. He's out in midday in the hot sun. He probably wants some money, this poor guy. So as we were driving out, he was crossing the road with his camels. So I opened the door and held out some money for him. And he said, la la, which is no. Moya, please, give me water. And I thought that was fascinating. I was embarrassed that I was offering money when here's a guy who really needed some water. So the roses attracted us to a place where we could see someone else in the way he lived his life.
Thank you, Arv. So they are roses, but they don't look like roses that we normally see, right? I brought something else I'm pretty sure that you would know what it is. Okay, how many do I have?
1.
And did anybody have eggs for breakfast today?
Me.
Okay. Now, so what happens, we know about eggs. We know where they come from. Where do they come from?
Chicken.
Chickens, yeah. And what do we do with them? Okay, and what happens if we drop them? And what happens if I throw it to you and you don't catch it? It could be messy, right? We'll splash Michael. Is it? Check it out. Is it hard-boiled? It's fake. Yeah, I tricked you a little bit. Now, if I had put that in a basket of balls instead of in an egg carton, I bet you wouldn't have thought it was an egg. But it looks like an egg.
I saw the bottom part was hard, but
And then it wasn't the right shape, right? Yeah. Sometimes things are not what we think they are. And sometimes things trick us a little bit, or we think there's something and they're really not, or we think that somebody's angry because it looks like anger, but really they're sad, or we think that somebody's being mean and really they're scared. So I brought this so that we would think about sometimes we have to look carefully, and we have to maybe not just assume it's an egg because it's where we'd expect to find an egg, but we want to look closely. That's partly what Kid Spirit's about. It's about asking questions. It's about looking closely. It's about wondering about the things that we're sure of and some things that we're not so sure about. So this is your time to enjoy your story and your time in Kid Spirit, and Karen and Michael are going to lead the way. From a collection of poems published in a book called Evidence is this poem by Mary Oliver called Mysteries. Yes? Truly, we live with mysteries too marvelous to be understood. How grass can be nourishing in the mouths of lambs. How rivers and stones are forever in allegiance with gravity, while we ourselves dream of rising. How two hands touch, and the bonds will never be broken. How people come from delight or the scars of damage to the comfort of a poem. Let me keep my distance always from those who think they have the answers. Let me keep company always with those who say, "Look," and laugh in astonishment and bow their heads. In the thoughts of this contemporary poet, in writings from the first century, we have many stories about those who began to follow the way of Jesus of Nazareth, and they called themselves at that time people of the way. They were Jews, they were not Christians. They were Jewish followers of an unauthorized, unorthodox rabbi, Jesus of Nazareth. And we have many collections of the stories of their experiences in their lives. One of which was this story of a man we best know as Paul, but whose name really in the beginning was Saul. And this is a story about an experience he had, or this is a story that has been told again and again to an early Jewish Christian community. Saul was breathing out threats to the disciples of Jesus. He was out for the kill. He went to the chief priest and he got arrest warrants to take to all the synagogues in Damascus so that if he found anyone there who belonged to the way, whether they were men or whether they were women, he could arrest them and bring them to Jerusalem. He set off, and when he got to the outskirts of Damascus, he was dazed by a blinding flash of light. And he fell to the ground and he heard a voice. And in the voice he heard the words, "Saul, why are you out to get me?" And he said, "Who are you?" And the voice said, "I'm the one you're hunting down. And I want you to get up and go into the city, and in the city you'll figure out what to do next." Those who were traveling with him were dumbstruck. They heard the sound, but they didn't see anyone. And Saul picked himself up off the ground. He found that his eyes were open, but he couldn't see anything. Those who were traveling with him took him by the hand and led him into Damascus. For the next 3 days, he could see nothing. In this story told to an early Jewish Christian community, there are many dangers in the world, but I doubt that there is anything more dangerous than a human being possessed of absolute certainty. It's as lethal as any weapon we'll ever build. In the world of this ancient story we just heard, Saul wasn't carrying a concealed weapon. He was armed with his absolutely unconcealed, utterly revealed certainty, along with the authority of civil and religious orders to eliminate dissidents. He was piously committed to eliminating the unorthodox voices from the synagogues in Syria. And Saul had the authority of the state to hunt them down, round them up, eliminate those Jews who were exploring a new path in their tradition by following the teachings of a martyred teacher. It was a program he was part of to silence those perceived as traitors. A program that had begun with the execution of Jesus of Nazareth. And even though their leader had been dead for more than 20 years, the empire that Saul served was still intent on destroying those who had been inspired to seek a peaceful way to remove the economic burden of unfair taxation and the oppressive collusion between the synagogue and the state. Saul was a loyal religious leader who took great satisfaction in ridding Judaism of impurity and ridding the empire of the disloyal. At the time we meet him in the world of this story, he's riding high in his career. He's riding high in approval ratings. He's riding high in the ranks. He's high in achieving the results his superiors want. He's riding high in meeting his personal goals. He's riding high with the power of making threats and instilling fear. He's riding high with a sense of purpose in the absolute rightness of what he's doing. Until that unsuspecting day when he gets knocked off his horse. There's such great potential in those moments when we get knocked off our horse. When we get thrown by a sudden impact to the ground of our common humanity. There's such great potential in that disorientation when we lose our bearings, when we have the wind knocked out of us, when we can't see any longer the path so clearly laid down before us, when we need the help of others. There's such great hope in being humbled by that tumble down. In seeing the world from our own backside instead of seeing it on the back of another. There's such potential for a new perspective. There's even the possibility of forming a new relationship with reality. And in Saul's case, he even became what he had opposed. For many years now, I've had those lines of the Mary Oliver poem that I just read to you as the signature on my personal email. And every now and then I think I should refresh it and put something new there, but somehow those words seem too important to me to take them off my eyeball. They're an invitation that I need every day to keep my distance always from those who think they have all the answers. Most of all, I keep that quote there as a way of warning myself from the deadly certainty of thinking that I have the answer. Because there's something within certainty that bends toward viciousness, and then it bends towards violence. And maybe that's why religion has had such an intimate relationship with violence. Maybe religion becomes so violent because it so quickly ceases to be known as experience and instead becomes dogma. And dogma can never stand on its own. It always has to be propped up. It has to be defended. And its assertions harden into certainty. And certainty can be deadly. But experience is never about certainty. Experience doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to win. It just seeks to be the ground from which we live. Imagine how different the history of every religious tradition would be if we saw our legacy as the sharing of our experiences, which we are given only to be shared. Think about how different our missionary enterprise would be if we had come deeply in touch with our own experience just to say to one another, I'll show you my treasures if you'll show me yours. At some point in our lives, we've all been wrong. Painfully, tragically, embarrassingly, and sometimes just sincerely wrong. At the time, we were convinced we were right, but as time passed, we learned that something was not as simple as we thought, or someone else was not as wrong as we thought, and we were not as right as we thought. And if we are fortunate, at some point in our lives, we'll get knocked off our horse. We'll have a chance to loosen our grip on what we think it is we know, and enter that disorienting darkness of not knowing anything for sure. And when light begins to find us again, we'll have a chance to find our feet with humility and openness and less certainty. I've told you about the wisdom one of my beloved elders shared with me. In her early 90s, my friend told me, "You know, Nancy, I've always been against divorce. I believed it was wrong. And then every one of my children got divorced. I was always against abortion. I thought it was wrong. And then my granddaughter had an abortion. I was always against homosexuality. I thought it was wrong. And then I learned that my favorite nephew was gay. And I guess you could say that I've lived long enough to change my mind about just about everything." My friend lived long enough to learn that certainty has the power to close our hearts and to rob us of relationship. And there is much to value in life beyond certainty. My elderly friend nurtured the soulful habit of letting experience challenge her certainties and confront her beliefs. She discovered that love trumps ideology. That listening to life and being stretched and changed and opened and deepened and changing our opinions and our ideas and being altered by relationship, these are among the gifts of life. In my early 20s, shortly after one of my earliest experiences of being knocked off my horse, I found myself in a place where I was deeply disillusioned with Christianity, which wouldn't have been too bad if I had not been a seminary student at the time. And I was even more disillusioned with the church, which is truly a bummer when you're a seminary student and faced with a future of employment in that which you have come to hate. One day in Southern California, I was walking to class, and I passed a Unitarian Universalist church, and it had a sign on its lawn that had caught my attention. It said, "Have all your answers questioned here." It was probably that wayside pulpit that saved my relationship with the church. I passed that sign every day on my way to class. But in that moment, when I had been knocked off my horse, it was part of what helped me find my feet. And I saw the possibility of a spiritual community that I could imagine myself being part of. A community that would keep vigil against the dangers of certainty, that would open to questions that would lead to another question and another question. A kind of community that would honor experience and would help me keep questioning my assumptions and would keep me from universalizing my experiences. And maybe at best, spiritual communities, at their very best, have the power to help inoculate us against deadly certainty by giving us those with whom we can keep company, who will always keep asking, "Look," who will laugh in astonishment, and who will bow their heads and live with a deep sense of reverence of all that we do not know and all the answers we carry that are so provisional, so temporary, so momentary, that we will keep company with those who will not seek to protect the answer, but to keep the questions alive. This is our time to ponder how to be that kind of community with and for one another. One of the gifts of spiritual community is that we do not have to carry our burdens and our worries and our concerns alone. And we have those with whom to share the joys and gifts of life. I want to take a few moments to invite us to name into this circle some of the joys we celebrate with one another this day, or some of the things we're carrying that we want to place in the circle that others might carry them with us. And we'll end offering what it is we name into the circle with the words, "In the joy and pain of living," and together we'll say, "We do not walk alone." Are there joys to be celebrated, concerns to be shared?
I'm particularly excited this Christmas season because my granddaughter from Chicago, her husband, and her 2 young children are coming and going to spend some time with us. And joy and the pain of living.
Just want to tell you, my husband's birthday today.
We celebrate Malcolm's birthday and the joys and pains of living.
I'd just like to mention that last weekend my partner's mom had a stroke, and so we went up to down to Calgary, but she is doing much better. She's home, and we'll hope to have her with us at Christmas. So in the joy and pain of living.
Yesterday, the TRC committee, and thanks to Joyce Madsen's cousin, came and spoke to us about the naming project. And I found that to be a joyous event in many ways, and hopeful that Indigenous folk who have been in photographs for many years now and not identified are discovering their families and reconnecting with their aunts, uncles, cousins, and loved ones through the project. And so I give thanks for that, and in the joy and pain of living.
Each month we also have the opportunity to hear about the work of the Mission and Service Fund, a collective fund of the United Church of Canada that supports development work and supports local organizations in Canada and around the world. And Gail's going to come and share a few moments with us.
Here at Southminster Steiner United Church, we have a long history of supporting global projects, including some over the years in South and Central America. If you've been around for a long time, like me, you'll remember projects such as Pigs for Nicaragua and Gardens for Argentine Schools. Guatemala is Central America's biggest economy right now, but wealth there is not evenly distributed. Nearly half the population is indigenous, and yet the Mayans, and especially the women, face severe discrimination. At least 2 women are killed violently every day in that small country, and the vast majority of indigenous children are chronically malnourished. Victoria Coombs, who is the coordinator of a group called Our Voice, has stated, "We are discriminated against. 1, because we are poor, 2nd, because we are indigenous, and 3rd, because we are women." The United Church of Canada works in partnership with the Guatemala Conference of Evangelical Churches, the Ecumenical Council of Guatemala, and the Women's Network of Maya Presbyterials to empower rural indigenous women and assist with income-generating projects. In 1981, the United Church World Development and Relief Program used the slogan, "By giving, you are there." By using this year's Gifts with Vision catalog, and there are copies out in the foyer on the table by the door, we can share in helping Mayan women feed their families. They are one of the projects that is celebrated in this year's Gifts with Mission project, which is a part of the Mission and Service Fund. By selecting the Guatemala program, you can ensure that some Mayan women will receive knowledge and training and seed packages so that they can start their own gardens and feed their children something nutritious. Of course, the Gifts with Vision program offers many different opportunities for helping others, both in Canada and around the world. And through Gifts with Vision, 100% of your money will go to outreach projects. As I said, there's some catalogs out on the table, and information is also available online at giftswithvision.ca. You can donate online, by mail, or by phone. So please, look at the catalog, look online, and select the projects that you would like to support as a Christmas gift to the world.
Three weeks ago today, Don and I had the opportunity to gather with the amazingly diverse congregation of Glide Memorial Church in the Tenderloin District in San Francisco. If you go online, you'll discover an amazing community, an amazingly diverse community. A young African-American man who was the preacher of the day told a story about his grandmother. And his grandmother had said that on her epitaph, she wanted the words on her tombstone to read, "She may have closed her eyes, but she never closed her heart." We go to hold our opinions lightly, to question our assumptions, to live in such a way that though our eyes may close, our heart need not ever close. We go to live this light of deep mystery with one another.
Hey, it's Christopher. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch last week's video, click this button right here. If you can manage it and can donate to SSUC to help us continue this video page, click right here. And for any information that you want about SSUC and our programs, visit our website right there.